special guest today. Interesting news out of Anaheim, and we've actually got some independent journalists that covered it last night, and we wanted to bring them in. It's Tim Pool and Amber Lyon, and they were in Anaheim last night between 8 and midnight, and their story is absolutely an amazing one. Now, first of all, if you don't know what's happening in Anaheim, as we've discussed on the show yesterday, there were several people shot in the neighborhood, and one of them was unarmed, this guy named Manuel Diaz, and cops say, hey, listen, he might have had heroin. He was on a list of people who we think are gang members. He'd been arrested before in his life, which was like 3 years ago, etc. None of that seems to justify the fact that they shot an unarmed guy. There's been protests in the street, and there have been more police-related shootings already this year, 6, than there were all of last year, 4, and 5 of them have resulted in deaths. So the community is very upset. Huge protests Saturday, Sunday, and now last night as well. So Tim and Amber were there last night. So Tim, let me start with you. First of all, set up for me what was happening in the streets.
I had been watching the live video coming out from the other independents, and we made it there around 8. We pulled into an Argo parking lot, and people just on Anaheim Boulevard and Broadway, lining every corner of the street, and police were in the street, and then police started running after people. Then rocks started flying past me. It really happened right when we got there. Police formed a wall and then pushed the protesters into a parking lot and at a mortuary and started firing pepper balls, bean bags, and other impact rounds like these. So
here, hold that up and explain to me what those are real quick.
So this is an exact impact. It's someone told me it's an expanding foam, not less lethal round, and it's designed so that it doesn't enter the eye socket or through the ribs. Then I've got here, this is a pepper ball that was fired. It's actually, you can see the fluid in there. I don't know if you can get that. This is pepper spray. And this is a super sock, 2581, fires it's a bean bag, essentially.
So they hit you with that stuff, and it's meant to do some damage, but not permanent damage. And so it's a way of dispersing the crowd. They can obviously be dangerous, but it's something between live bullets and nothing.
Yeah, they're called less lethal because they can be lethal. They're not non-lethal rounds. At a closer range, these, aside from the pepper balls, these 2 rounds can kill you if hit in the abdomen. And we heard reports that someone was shot, within 5 feet in the chest. So it's pretty intense out there.
Right, and of course, people might remember that a veteran was shot at one of the protests in Northern California, and he got hit in the head, and it caused some serious damage. It was in the hospital. So this is not something to be used lightly. On the other hand, Amber, it doesn't seem like it was a light situation. In the videos that you've got on timcast.tv, you've got the dumpsters on fire. So what was happening with the crowd, first of all?
Well, the crowd was very upset. You could tell that a lot of people were angry at the police. There was some, at one point, Tim and I were almost hit by a glass bottle that was thrown at police. But then if you look at the other side of the situation too, there was one point where Tim and I were just in the middle of the street photographing a dumpster that was on fire. And there had been a fire truck blocking the middle of the street, and when that truck pulled away, all of a sudden it revealed a wall of police officers that just started firing indiscriminately down the street, and everyone screamed and started running away, and I hid between 2 U-Hauls and was able to keep myself from getting hit. Tim was able to scale a wall and get away, and eventually the shooting didn't stop, and I kept peering out the side of the truck to see if they were going to quit. So I ended up putting my hands up in the air and saying press, and then walking toward them, and was able to get away. But that was what I think was most disturbing, is that these officers were walking through residential areas in a wall, just completely taking over the entire street and just firing down these streets. You could see residents who were in their homes peering out their windows, pretty terrified.
So when they saw that you were press and a blonde girl, they didn't shoot?
Yeah. When I walked out, a light was shown on me, and they were able to not shoot me. And even one of the officers even told me that he had been worried about me at the time because he thought I was going to get hit. And I was thinking, well, then maybe you shouldn't have been shooting at us.
Okay,
it was
crazy.
Yeah. I didn't have that luxury. When after I went over the wall and came out, I had my press ID in my hand, and I had my hands up, and they just started firing at me because I'm not a blonde woman.
No,
Poor
but
Tim.
okay, but seriously, did they seem to acknowledge the press pass at all?
If I'm close enough, then yes. they would let us move in between through the lines and give us warnings and stuff like that. But if we were, when they started firing, I was chased through side streets for a half an hour with them firing at me, and there's no way for me to get close enough. And I was yelling press and
that's kind of what's disturbing is they've set a precedent where as a journalist you feel like the only safe place is to hide behind the wall of police officers instead of actually getting in there with the protesters, seeing what's happening to them. You saw so many journalists who felt like they had to stand back with police.
See, that's a great point, because that's not an accident. Then you're embedded with the cops and you see it from their perspective, as opposed to being embedded with the civilians and the protesters and seeing it from their perspective. And from their perspective, they're being fired on, right? Now, but at the same time, if you're pressed on the other side, you say, well, look, there's glass bottles being thrown and there's, these fires, etc. So give me a sense of scale here. How many streets are we talking about? How large is this neighborhood? How big is the protest?
The protest was, when we got there, it seemed like a couple hundred people, maybe just shy of 200. And there was about maybe 100 or more police officers. It seemed more and more officers just kept showing up. So, we're at the intersection and the police moved in an outward direction, pushing the protesters out in 3 different directions and then looping back around. So there was, for the most part, it wasn't an organized protest. It was a lot of locals who had started gathering because of the spectacle and because of the outrage in the community. And there was, real quick, there was a point where at the end of the night in a Vons parking lot, there were people who were grocery shopping getting arrested because the police were in the parking lot saying, disperse, and people were standing by their cars and they just got snatched up.
Right, and people have to remember, this is a neighborhood. The people live here, right? So they're at the Vons because they needed eggs and bread.
Yeah,
Okay.
as one guy who got arrested said.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I'm trying to get a sense of what the cops should have done. And I think that's a much harder question, right? So if you've got a couple hundred people in the streets, and then you got some dumpsters that are burning, et cetera, they're going to want to control that situation. Having been in there, being in the center of it, what do you think what did they do wrong? What would you have done otherwise?
I think that they felt like they were trying to control the situation and
Right.
disperse the crowd, but I think at the same time they were escalating the amount of anger because you were having regular civilians who were just standing on the street corner to shoot a photo of the action who were getting shot at or getting arrested while they were grocery shopping. And so now you look at today, there's more protests planned. Well, those are people who may not have been protesting before and now are filled with anger and are going to be hitting the streets. And I really don't know as far as advice, what advice I would have given the officers, but I felt like it could have been handled slightly better than
See,
that.
that's another really interesting point by Amber, because what that does is it creates a multiplier effect, where then those 100 people who got fired at, or the 200 that got fired at, or the more people that got arrested that were just standing around, because it's literally their street or their neighborhood, right? Well, then they get more and more angry, and their family gets angry, and their loved ones get angry, and then they show up to protest. What I think that the main thing that I take away from this is that the police have to have a sense of, look, obviously we got to control the situation, but that's not our only job. In fact, our primary job is to help this community, because we're here to serve this community to have order. Now, we don't want to get it out of hand because people in the community might get hurt. And I can't have the fires, for example. If I was the cops, that's how I think, right? But at the same time, if I'm indiscriminately firing into that community, it's hard to make an argument that you're serving them and you're there to protect them.
And a note on that is the fires were in the outlying area outside of where the initial group was at Broadway and Anaheim, and when they were pushed out by police is when the people started lighting fires. So it's cause and effect. You've got angry people gathering around, seeing this big police presence. The police fire on them, so then they throw bottles and rocks. So the police fire indiscriminately now because they're throwing things, and then more people start showing up, and it's building tensions. I think the police aren't allowed to have a bad day. And I don't mean to, I'm sorry to say it, but it's true that you have to separate the emotion, the heat of being angry that this is happening, and be a professional and realize that communication with the community is what's going to resolve the situation, not firing beanbags and rubber bullets.
Right. And I want everybody to understand, too, take it in its important, proper context, which is that if you were having bottles and rocks thrown at you, you'd get heated too, right?
Yep.
And you'd want to protect yourself. But remember, as Tim is saying, and I think it's a really good point, your job is to protect the community. You're not a random guy. You're not a plumber. You're not a baker. Somebody attacks you, you're going to want to attack back. You're a cop, and your job is to protect the community. And sometimes, you're in the line of danger when that happens. And I'm not just saying this. I feel for you in that regard. That's a tough thing to have that being thrown at you when you're trying to maintain order. But you're, like Tim said, you're not a regular schmo. Your job is to keep your cool and make sure you protect yourself as well as others in that area. And this is not going to do it, man. You're right. I think the protests are going to continue to get larger and larger because people feel like they're under attack now. And the final thing here, guys, is that it's interesting juxtaposing that to, for example, some of the Occupy protests, where there's a lot of emotion as well. But here, when it's somebody's identity that's at stake, because I feel like the community feels under attack because of their identity, well, then it's a whole different level of anger and passion. And do you think that's contributing to what's happening in the streets?
Definitely, and I think that they were very upset that a lot of external police forces were brought into the community. There were civilians saying, why don't we have our own police force here that actually understands our community? There was definitely a barrier because they had police officers in from Los Angeles and other surrounding counties. And they just felt that they didn't understand them, they didn't understand their passion. And like we said earlier, normal, regular civilians who are just taking photos were getting fired on. And Tim and I have been predicting that it's only going to escalate because you could just feel the anger and the hurt on the streets last night.
It's a recurring thing. I see this at most of the protests. People say that we want police from our community policing our streets, not these outside forces being brought in.
It's funny you say that because so much of this is analogous to the Middle East, where we go fire indiscriminately and then wonder why people hate us. And then the Sunnis will say, we need Sunni police here, not Shiite police. And the Shiite police will say the same thing about their neighborhoods. And that's because there's a level of trust if the person is from the neighborhood. Yeah. I mean, if it's, Bob down the street, who is a cop but is one of you, well, that's, not one of you in any other sense than that he lives down the street and you know him, right? And you know his family. So it's very interesting. But most of all, I'm so glad that there are independent journalists who are actually seeing it from the perspective of the citizens. So Tim Pool, Amber Lyon, great job, guys. Thank you so much for sharing this. And if you want to see more, go to www.timcast.tv, and they've got the videos from the protests there as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.